What is Halloween? Meaning and popular traditions. The fall season brings changing leaves, cooler weather, and, of course, Halloween. It's a time of year when children wait all month long in October for the chance to dress up in costumes and go door-to-door hunting for candy. Many people look forward to the holiday for its tricks and treats. But what is the true meaning of Halloween? Halloween is a popular holiday in the United States that is celebrated by both children and adults. It occurs once every year on the 31st of October, which is the last day of the month. However, it is not a federal holiday recognized by the government, which leaves many people to believe that it is more of a celebration. The origins of Halloween stem from the pagan festival of Samhain, which began about 2,500 years ago as a Celtic celebration that gradually picked up Christian religious roots. The Catholic Church created the holiday of All Saints' Day, also called All Hallows' Day, which was to be celebrated on November 1st. This then designated October 31st as All Hallows' Eve. Halloween didn't come to the United States until around 1845 when Irish immigrants left their country due to the potato famine. When they arrived, they brought their Catholic celebrations with them, which is what introduced Americans to Halloween. The Halloween name as we know it has gone through many changes before its current name finally stuck. The term is actually a shortened version of All Hallows' Eve. What happens on Halloween? Halloween has changed a bit over the years. When the holiday first started, people would dress up in animal skins or wrap themselves up as mummies. People would carve turnips instead of pumpkins. And they would go door to door asking for soul cakes instead of candy. Today, Halloween looks much different. Many of the same traditions are still present, but they have taken on a new light. Celebrations have evolved to resemble the Halloween that many people know and love. Dressing up in costumes. Today, it might be difficult for you to go out on Halloween night and find someone dressed up in real animal skins. However, you will definitely still see people in costumes. Children and adults dress up in elaborate disguises, such as cartoon characters, dinosaurs, superheroes, classic Halloween monsters, and just about anything you can imagine. When Halloween first began, people used to dress up in order to disguise themselves from evil spirits. People believed that these spirits and ghosts could cross over into the world of the living on Halloween night. But they could escape their wrath if the spirits couldn't find or recognize them. Today, people dress up because it's fun to be whatever you want to be for one night. And because it's a fun way to express yourself and get creative with your costume. You can even earn yourself some bragging rights if you win a contest for best costume. Trick or treating. Trick or treating actually began as part of a Celtic religious tradition. Working-class families would visit the homes of rich families and ask for soul cakes. Soul cakes are small and round desserts that are a cross between a cookie and a biscuit. Wealthy families would give them to others who promised to pray for the souls of loved ones who had passed away. Eventually, people started to leave the soul cakes outside for visitors to claim in order to prevent evil spirits from playing tricks on them. Today, people go trick or treating for candy. Children and their parents walk for blocks and blocks collecting candy bars, stickers, and even caramel apples. At the end of the night, kids try to eat as much candy as they can without getting a stomach ache. Bobbing for apples. Bobbing for apples stems from a romantic British tradition used in courtship. Eligible young ladies would bob for apples that symbolized eligible bachelors who could be their potential match. Ladies would dunk their heads into a barrel of water and try to grab the apple that represented their crush. If they were successful, a courtship between the two would begin. Today, people don't bob for apples in order to impress a romantic partner. Instead, the activity is more of a party game to celebrate the season. Friends and family line up to compete to see who can grab the most apples in a minute. Instead of using a barrel, people now use bowls. Afterward, many people make caramel or candy-covered apples with the fruit they grabbed from the water. Bobbing for apples is still a friendly competition. However, instead of someone's hand in marriage, the reward is bragging rights and a sweet treat. Decorating your house. People didn't always decorate their homes for Halloween. In fact, when Halloween first began in the United States, it was thought of as more of a holiday for adults, rather than for children. This changed when trick-or-treating took off in the 50s, which caused people to make the change towards more of a cute and spooky Halloween in the U.S., rather than a frightening one. In fact, Mamie Eisenhower even decorated the White House for Halloween for the first time ever in 1958. She hosted a lunch for the families of staff members that included skeletons hanging from the walls, dried cornstalks, red apples, and lots of pumpkins. After the White House accepted Halloween decorations, many more Americans picked up the tradition. If you walk through your neighborhood now during Halloween time, you'll probably see numerous houses decorated for the season. People use orange and purple lights, lots of pumpkins, witches on broomsticks, and tombstone lawn decorations to ring in the season. Carving pumpkins. Long ago, people in the United Kingdom would harvest a large number of turnips during the fall and winter seasons. Due to the surplus, people would use the vegetables to carve faces into them to ward off evil spirits during the season. Some would even hollow out the turnips and place candles inside. Their creations were called punkies. During the fall and winter months in the U.S., people often grow pumpkins, instead of turnips, to bulk up their food supply. This is how the tradition of carving turnips has transformed into the tradition of carving pumpkins. Today, many people carve jack-o'-lanterns with their families and set them out on their steps with lit candles inside to create a spooky glow. Some even roast the pumpkin seeds as a snack and use the insides to make homemade pumpkin pie. Going to a haunted house. According to Lisa Morton's book Trick or Treat: A History of Halloween, haunted houses were first created during the Great Depression. Parents decided that they needed to come up with a plan to keep their kids entertained on Halloween night to prevent from them stirring up trouble. Many parents decorate their basements in different Halloween themes and invite their children and their friends to travel from house to house in order to keep an eye on them. It ended up being a win-win for parents and kids as the mischief was reduced, and the kids actually enjoyed the frightening affair. Today, thousands of people go to haunted houses during the Halloween season for a good scare. The houses and events have gotten more elaborate with haunted hay rides, spooky corn mazes, and, of course, frightening haunted houses. Staying away from black cats. Long ago, many people believed that black cats were a symbol of witchcraft, evil omens, and bad luck. Legend says that some people believed black cats to be witches in disguise and that witches could transform themselves and shape-shift into these furry animals whenever they pleased. Many also believed that black cats were sent by demons or Satan to spy on people without being seen. This is a superstition that many people still believe to this day. In fact, many people think that it's extremely unlucky to have a black cat cross their path on Halloween night in particular. Such an event might signal that the person has seen an evil spirit or give them bad luck for the rest of the year. As a result of this folklore, many people have a fear of black cats and try to avoid them on Halloween night. It's also common for people to use black cats as part of their Halloween decor for this same spooky reason. Overall, Halloween is now one of the most popular holidays in the United States. And it's even gained popularity in different countries around the world. People are excited to dress up in elaborate costumes, come together as a community, and eat lots of candy. Maybe even they'll enjoy a scare or two. The holiday has gone through many transformations to become the Halloween that many people know and love. All of these changes make Halloween a day truly worth celebrating. The origins of Halloween are darker than you imagined. Unlike the holidays of Christmas and Thanksgiving, which both have clear, historical paths to the present, the history of Halloween is a little more elusive. Have you ever wondered where all our contemporary Halloween rituals come from? Why, for example, do we ask strangers for treats and threaten to trick them if they hold out on us? As a holiday that prides itself on being spooky and mysterious, it makes sense that Halloween's history is similarly murky. But we're here to dispel the rumors and separate fact from fiction. It turns out that between all the candy consumption, dress-up fun, mischief-making, and dark-side dabbling, the holiday traces back to an ancient Celtic festival. From there, it only gets more complex, though. If you're like, wait, what about the witches and ghosts and stuff? Don't worry, we'll get there. First, we're dipping into the real dark side of Halloween, which has much more to do with the politics and violence of imperialism than it does with goblins and ghouls. As with many annual holiday rituals that now seem arbitrary, like dyeing eggs on Easter, many of Halloween's origins and traditions are deeply rooted in mythology. So keep listening to learn about Halloween's origin story and how it has evolved over the centuries at the whims of history and through oral tradition into the beguiling, albeit commercialized, holiday we know and love today. Ancient Celtic origins. The Og Halloween predates Christianity, stretching all the way to an ancient Celtic celebration known as Samhain that took place in what is now Ireland, parts of France, and the United Kingdom. Like most ancient holidays, Samhain marked a transition of seasons, from summer to the beginning of winter, hence the sort of dark and stormy vibes of Halloween today. Participants believed that on the night of October 31st, the portal between the realm of the living and the dead opened, allowing lost souls to return to the human-occupied earth. This ghostly meaning was associated with a few things, from the agricultural to the supernatural. The festivals also typically involved bonfires, at which the attendees wore costumes and participated in sacrifices of crops and animals. Afterward, the community would use the bonfire to light their own hearths as a sort of closing ceremony for summer and initiation of winter. So while death and fear were at the heart of Samhain, it had its fun and celebratory side too. Roman rule. After the Roman Empire conquered much of the Celtic territory in 43 CE, Romans ruled there for some few hundred centuries, during which the tradition evolved. There are links to the Roman festival of Feralia, in which the community mourned its dead, and another ceremony called Pomona, in which participants honored fruit and trees. The Middle Ages. By a few hundred years into Roman reign, the Catholic Church was increasingly attempting to replace pagan practices with its own, often while vilifying the former but keeping some of its traditions. In the 8th century, when local people converted to Christianity, the Roman Catholic Church often incorporated modified versions of older religious traditions in order to win converts, as Albany University puts it. As a result, many elements of Samhain persisted. According to History.com, the Church made November 2 All Souls' Day, a day to honor the dead, and all saints known and unknown, in an attempt to replace the Celtic holiday with a church-sanctioned version of it. Festivities on this day included dressing up as various saints, angels, and the devil. All Saints' Day was also known as All Hallows' Days, hence the later moniker of All Hallows' Eve. 16th century England. In the 1500s, England's King Henry VIII cut ties with the Roman Catholic Church because the Pope refused to annul his marriage with Catherine of Aragon, creating the Church of England. As a result, much more tolerance was extended to the Protestant Church for some years, but the Church of England remained mostly Catholic, and became even more so during the reign of Queen Mary I, aka Bloody Mary. She established England's connection to the Roman Catholic Church in part by ordering the execution of 300 Protestants. After her, it was sort of the opposite, as Queen Elizabeth I was a Protestant. Okay, but what does this have to do with Halloween? Well, let's fast forward to the pilgrimage across the Atlantic. Halloween history in the United States. The colonial period, 1600s to 1700s. The popularity of Hallows' Eve during the American colonial era varied from place to place, depending on how devoutly Protestant the communities were. The early colonists were Puritans and fled England because of religious persecution, which is why they were known as separatists. So, for example, in very puritanical New England, Hallows' Eve wasn't as widely celebrated, but in the less rigid southern colonies, which were formed more as business ventures than religious communities, the holiday was still observed. During this era, celebrations around the harvest emerged and became associated with Hallows' Eve, likely as a result of the cultural exchanges between indigenous people and Anglo-Saxon settler colonialists. Similar to the way in which the Roman Catholic Church replaced indigenous cultural and religious practices with its own iterations, the same happened here with the settlers and local indigenous populations. The early Republic, late 1700s to 1800s. A few generations later, once the U.S. won independence from England and formed a nation, the country saw a huge wave of European immigrants who brought with them new traditions, and media. In 1759, the Scottish poet Robert Burns wrote a poem entitled Halloween, which described some of the holiday practices at the time and introduced the term we know today. The word itself seems to be a portmanteau of the word hallow, which originally meant saint, mixed with een, which was an abbreviation of the word Eve, or the night before, according to BigThink.com. European and American imperialism. So how did the holiday reach so many different countries around the world? The answer is simple: European imperialism. As with most holidays, Halloween celebrations vary from region to region, and different modern iterations of the traditions stem from different ancient cultural practices. But the common thread is the brutality of imperialism and accompanying forced assimilation. Spanish imperialism in South America, late 1500s to 1900s. While English separatists were fighting for independence during the 1600s and 1700s and then later in the early Republic, they were also establishing a nation in which citizenship was inextricably linked and defined by one's relationship to land ownership. Similar practices were unfolding in other parts of the continent, except the colonizers were Spanish Catholics. Even as the Spanish Catholic conquistadores subjugated indigenous people to forced conversion, there were still, of course, traces of local worship and culture, resulting in a fusion of indigenous practices with Catholic holidays. That's why figures like Santa Muerte, which the official Catholic Church still refuses to recognize as a part of the canon, persist today. Day of the Dead also falls on the Catholic holiday All Saints and looks quite different from Americanized Halloween. More on that in a minute. British imperialism during the Victorian era, 1800s–1900. This time period was also one of British expansion and subjugation. Of course, along with colonization came the violent and forced assimilation of other religious practices. As Max Fisher writes in the Washington Post, the irony is that, while the British were responsible for spreading Halloween, they also spent several decades trying to stamp it out. In the late 19th century, the strict Victorian social code called for, among other things, a rigid class hierarchy, gender roles that privileged men over women, sexual restraint, an obsession with manners, and a deep disdain for all things that might be perceived as indulgent. Halloween, having to do with dressing up, superstitions, and death, was of course one of the many practices that come under fire. Halloween experienced a resurgence in the UK and its colonies all over the globe, including Hong Kong and Singapore, among many others, after Queen Victoria died in 1901 and social attitudes gradually shifted. American imperialism, 1900s present. The turn of the century was also marked by the rise of U.S. military intervention abroad in countries including the Philippines, Japan, Hawaii, and Iran, where the spread of American cultural practices, traditions, and media was one way to fulfill what scholar Homi K. Bhabha deems colonial mimicry, meaning peripheral access to dominant American culture. Media, of course, includes all that Halloween stuff. In many of these countries, you'll see local influences fused with the commercialized Anglo-Saxon version of the holiday, emphasizing the pattern of Halloween as both a means of resistance and dominance. By the time the 1950s rolled around, Halloween was incredibly commercial as more and more industries were able to profit off of it. As Vox reports, confectionaries knew candy would be an easy thing to pass out on Hallows Eve and predicted that kids would want it, so they increased production, thus increasing affordability and accessibility and ultimately sales, which finally brought about some your favorite Halloween staples, like trick-or-treating and dressing up. 8 fun things to do with your kids for Halloween. While traditional methods of celebrating Halloween by letting your children wander the neighborhood are becoming less advisable because of safety concerns, you can still find ways to make the upcoming holiday exciting and fun for young children. Creative parents can come up with some fun DIY activities that the whole family can enjoy. Here are 8 ways to make Halloween fun for your kids. 1. Decorate pumpkins. Every kid loves to pick out their own pumpkin at the grocery store or a local produce stand. As a mother of 3 children, I have always let it be an opportunity for them to express themselves by picking the kind that appeals to them. Whether it is big or little or odd-shaped, doesn't matter. Decorating the pumpkins can be a great family tradition to build on every year. For young children, especially, I do not recommend carving the pumpkins. This can be a risk for injuries. If you just buy them as is, and decorate the outside, the pumpkins will last longer. There are so many neat ways to dress up pumpkins. You can use markers, glitter glue, acrylic paint, buttons, beads, various kinds of string, cords, and cloth. Anything and everything can make pumpkin look cool. Try new ways to decorate them every year to make the event more fun. Let the children draw their own designs and be supportive and excited by what they come up with, so they can feel proud of their original art. 2. Fix up the yard. Here is one of the easiest ways to celebrate Halloween. Use the trees or shrubs in your yard to hang lights, figurines, or ghosts. You can even have all different types. As long as you have a photo that can be converted to a digital file, there are many places to order figurines from that will look lifelike and scary, especially when they have lights around them. Use your imagination and let the children help with the yard decor. How about a wheelbarrow full of dirt and a skeleton? Or you could create what looks like an old graveyard. Use whatever you have on hand and get the whole family involved. If you have a front porch, you can make it look like a spooky mansion. You can hang cobwebs, bats, and lights and decorate with various kinds of homemade candles. You can make a scarecrow-type figure that sits in a chair. Welcome anything your kids can think of as a good idea, as long as it is safe. 3. Make their own costumes. Help the children decide on the type of costume they want. This is one of the funniest things for them to do. Give them a few ideas, based on movies or toys they own, and see what you can come up with together. Face painting is more fun than making masks and it is inexpensive. Visit the nearest dollar store and let the kids shop for cheap decorations they want. Stores are a great place to visit, just for ideas. You could buy already made costumes, or you can get ideas, and after visiting Goodwill stores, buy enough inexpensive items to make up the costumes yourself. 4. Baked treats together. Any holiday is better with some kind of treat you can let your children make with you in the kitchen. Some ideas you can do are baking various kinds of cookies, muffins, or desserts made with fruit yogurt, or ice cream. You could also do caramel apples. The funniest part will be using nuts, candy, and other toppings to decorate your items with. Here are some other ideas for baking. You can also do various kinds of crafts and there are tons of ideas to choose from on the internet. 5. Have a sleepover. The most exciting thing you can do for your kids is to help them plan a sleepover for Halloween. At any age, kids love to have their friends over from school, church or daycare. It may take a little time to plan it out, but believe me, it is the best thing you can do. You can make the invitations by hand, help them decide who to invite, and talk over ideas about possible craft activities to have or games to play. You might even want to choose a party theme. For younger children, as parents, you will need to do most of the planning. But as your children get older, let them take over the responsibilities. Teach them to learn about the costs involved in putting a party together, so they won't go crazy with ideas, and they will learn to stay within a budget limit you decide. Even if you don't have a sleepover, one of the cheapest ways to create Halloween fun is to use one room in your house as a spooky room. You and your children can decorate it in outrageous ways, like putting up cardboard forms, boxes, and other decor, and plastering the room with spider webs and mini lights. Make sure the lights are not too close to any other materials that could be a fire hazard. One idea is to make the entry to the room so small that the children have to squeeze in there and go through a type of maze. 6. Make a spooky room. Even if you don't have a sleepover, one of the cheapest ways to create Halloween fun is to use one room in your house as a spooky room. You and your children can decorate it in outrageous ways, like putting up cardboard forms, boxes, and other decor, and plastering the room with spider webs and mini lights. Make sure the lights are not too close to any other materials that could be a fire hazard. One idea is to make the entry to the room so small that the children have to squeeze in there and go through a type of maze. 7. Get teens involved. An easy way to up the level of fun at your party, or even if you don't have a party planned, is to get your teenagers involved, or even your neighbor's children. Have the older children dress up in scary costumes and surprise the younger ones by popping out suddenly and chasing them around in a game of touch tag. It's easy, it's fun, and it will be very exciting for the youngsters. 8. Make a scary video. Homemade videos are another project you could do. With most cell phones, you can easily make a video of just about anything. You can record all the activities your family does together, or you can work on things with your children and have an older child operate the phone or video camera. There are many ideas for making fun videos, and having contests during the party is one idea of the activities you could record. No matter what you choose from the variety of activities suggested by the 8 ideas above, just make sure to pay attention to how your children deal with stress. A younger child may not be ready for too much excitement. Or, they may get scared and upset by the costumes. Remember to talk to your children ahead of time, to make sure they are okay with whatever activities are planned. Keep in mind that the main objective is to spend time together as a family, or for them to get to see their friends. The most important thing you can do is make it simple, good old-fashioned fun for everyone. 5 truly haunted places worth visiting this Halloween. Halloween is just about here. This happens to be my personal favorite holiday of the year. As a kid, it meant being able to run around with my siblings and friends and gather more candy than we could possibly eat. We were able to dress up in silly costumes and actually wear them in public. So much fun. The true meaning of Halloween was lost to me at the time though. The name Halloween is a derivative of the original Western Christian Allhallowtide or Halloween season. It consisted of All Saints' Eve, which is now Halloween, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. This started October 31st and would go through November 2nd. The long and short of it is that it was meant to be a time to remember the dead. It was believed that the veil between the living and the dead was thinned, and in order to prevent being recognized by the wandering souls, spirits, people would wear masks or costumes. This is eventually how trick or treating came to fruition. It can also be tied back to the Celtic roots of Samhain. In the spirit of both what Halloween is today and All Hallows' Eve, I have put together a list of places that are claimed to still be occupied by the dead. 1. The most notorious haunted house in Ohio, Franklin Castle. Officially called the Tiedemann House but called Franklin Castle by locals. In the late 1800s, the Tiedemann family moved into the large home and were quickly struck by a travesty. Hannes Tiedemann's mother and one of his daughters passed away within a few weeks of one another. Over the following 3 years, 3 more of the Tiedemann's children passed away, which is when the renovations began. The story goes that Hannes started the renovations to keep his wife's mind off of the deaths of her children. By 1895, Hannes's wife passed away from liver failure. He remarried shortly after, which started the whispers questioning the truth of how she may have died. This also begs the question about the validity of the children's deaths as well. Whether there was foul play or not, there are some very unsettled spirits in this beautiful home. In 1968, James Romano and his family moved in and immediately experienced strange things in their new home. James contacted the Northeast Ohio Psychical Research Society, a local team of ghost hunters, to investigate the castle, and the story is that one of the researchers ran screaming from the home. The Romanos then turned to a Catholic priest for help, who refused to bless the house because of what he felt when he stepped onto the property. Several people have attempted to take on the Franklin Castle and failed. Today it sits in disarray with boards covering the windows hiding the eerie presence within. 2. Bellevue Biltmore Hotel haunting. In 1897, a railroad tycoon Henry Plant built a grand hotel. The history is a little convoluted, but there is no denying that this gorgeous hotel has several spirits that roam the halls and rooms. There are too many personal accounts of actual sightings and strange happenings to be denied. One man claims to have heard someone tell him to go F himself, and another invisible presence identified himself as Walter. Later he claims to have seen a woman dressed in traditional 30s attire in a hallway, and when he walked to her she vanished. As he went to walk upstairs, he heard a woman's voice say, "Don't go up there. They are mad at me." The electrician for Bellevue Biltmore claimed his tools kept going missing and kept encountering freezing spots. In spring, while working on the Starlight Room, he was shoved and told to "get out" by someone who was visibly not there. One man claims that a small boy ran into his room followed by his laughing toddler son, and the first boy disappeared right in front of him. Accounts of people being pushed when no one was there, doors closing on their own, and countless others are rampant at Henry Plant's old hotel. Unfortunately, the 118-year-old hotel, called the White Queen of the Gulf, has now been demolished to build 28 townhomes and 104 condominiums. Preservationists tried for years to save the historical hotel, but eventually, it was cleared for demolition. The question now is, will these new homes be plagued by the spiritual history of the White Queen, or will they have moved on? 3. Clay House hauntings. The clay house is now owned by Betty Snyder, who has renovated the old home and turned it into a family restaurant. Complete with German and American food, homemade desserts, and a side of ghosts. Betty, her family, and guests have all claimed to have had strange experiences there. Knocks that come from the other side of the fire escape, and people walking down the stairs disappear. The Snyder family seems to cohabitate well with the other residents. They even claim that they think the spirits are happy that they cleaned the place up. Stop in for some home cooking and see for yourself. 4. The Winchester Mystery House. Born in 1840, Sarah Lockwood Pardee was from a well-off family, went to the best school, spoke 4 languages, and played the piano. In 1862, she married the son of the governor of Connecticut and the manufacturer of the famous Winchester repeating rifle, William Wirt Winchester. They had a happy life together and then that ended. In 1866, their infant daughter died of marasmus. Sarah went into a deep depression. 15 years later her husband followed her daughter in death. The story is that Mrs. Winchester sought help from a spiritualist who told her that her family and her fortune were being haunted by the spirits of those killed by the Winchester rifle. She was told that these spirits caused the deaths of her family and that she was next. She was then told the only way to end this cycle of death was to move and build a house for the spirits. As long as she never stopped building, her life would not be in danger. In fact, building this house to appease these spirits would even bring her eternal life. So she did just that. Mrs. Winchester moved away and promptly began building a beautiful home with people working around the clock to appease the spirits and save her life. With virtually unlimited resources due to the inheritance she had accrued after the death of her husband, the mansion grew and grew in size and beauty. Upon her death, the mansion was over 6 acres and contained 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. The house is now open to the public, which has allowed for some very strange accounts of supernatural activity. All of the caretakers claim to hear footsteps and breathing in what are visibly empty rooms. Things like doors being locked and unlocked and lights being turned back on as they are closing up the house for the night. Complete with a ghostly man still working and walking around with his wheelbarrow in the basement. This old mansion surely has one of the most interesting histories and some of the most intriguing lingering spirits. 5. The haunted history of the LaLaurie House. Located in the French Quarter of New Orleans, the LaLaurie House is known as one of the most frightening locations. In 1832, Dr. Louis LaLaurie and his wife, Delphine, moved into their Creole mansion in the French Quarter. The family was both respected and admired for the lavish social functions they conducted and their extreme wealth. What was kept from the outside world was the extreme cruelty and mistreatment of the slaves by Madame LaLaurie. She kept her cook chained to the fireplace. A neighbor noticed the frequency of slaves that came and went from the LaLaurie home without explanation, and she also saw Madame LaLaurie chase a young slave up her stairs with a whip. The little girl climbed to the roof and jumped off, to her death. Madame LaLaurie had the child buried in her yard. As more and more stories of things like this circled the Creole society, the LaLaurie family's invitations were declined, and the family was avoided. Later, A fire broke out at the LaLaurie home and it is suspected that the cook started it. After putting the fire out, the firefighters found a secret barred door in the attic that held behind it the most repulsive deranged acts you could imagine. The New Orleans Bee reported that there were over a dozen slaves chained to the wall, strapped to makeshift operating tables, or in cages meant for dogs. Human body parts were scattered around, even human heads in buckets, lips sewn shut and stomachs cut open. The list of extreme psychotic brutality goes on. Once word got out, a mob formed around the LaLaurie house but the owners were never seen again. The house remained vacant for years. From 1837 through the 2000s the home has gone through several different owners who have tried to make something of the once beautiful home but were plagued by screams of agony at night and apparitions of slaves that still lived in the home. In the late 90s, in the midst of yet another remodeling, skeletal remains were found beneath the wooden floor of the house. Who knows how many more small graves are scattered among the homes still undiscovered. With the history of any home built in the 1800s, I would be sure to take measures to make sure there were no skeletons in my closet, very literally, before buying it. If buying homes with history and some permanent residence is your thing, or you simply want to experience supernatural activity firsthand, GPR radar and an EMF reader will be your best friends. After hearing about the gruesome deaths of past residents and chilling accounts of people's experiences, you can be the judge. A night in one of these buildings just may make a believer out of you. If not, it is one way to remember the dead and experience something unique this All Hallows Eve. 6 ways to reuse last year's Halloween costumes. Halloween is a fantastically fun holiday that can inspire you to go all out when it comes to decorations and costumes. Still, spending loads of money on great costumes for the kids every year can get a little pricey. Fortunately, you don't have to waste all of those old looks. They'll come in handy for various future projects. Make creative Halloween decorations. Just because Halloween is over and the kids are quickly growing doesn't mean you have to trash their old costumes. You can turn those old costumes into yard decorations to use all year long or just around Halloween time. This Halloween, spend some time choosing stupendous-looking kids' costumes for parties. Why? Later, you can stuff that Frankenstein or Buzz Lightyear costume with old clothes and cotton batting, and it will look amazing in your yard or hanging from your porch. The whole neighborhood will be envious of your creative yard decorations. Upcycle for different events. Before you recycle the old costumes, try upcycling them. Lots of kids don't want to wear the same costume twice, at least where all of their friends can see it. If your little one went as a pirate or a ballerina, that costume could come in handy during a school play or a dance recital. They could also wear it to a cousin's costume-themed birthday party or another holiday party. Hang on to it for at least a year so that you get the most use out of it. You can even collect costumes from family and friends and put them into a dress-up bin. Encourage your kids to perform a play of their own. Halloween hand-me-downs. Do you have more than one child or other young relatives? The rules for hand-me-downs apply to Halloween costumes as well. This is particularly true if you have a younger child, niece, nephew, or neighbor who looks up to one of your older kids. The little ones will love wearing a big kid's costume next year, plus you'll save someone else from spending money. Initiate a costume swap. Another way to save while getting the most out of the holiday is to swap costumes. If your kids are part of a playgroup, have best friends at school, or if you're close to a group of mothers, talk about swapping costumes. Each child gets something new to them, and no one has to spend money on a brand new costume. After you've swapped as much as you can either look for different ways to reuse old costumes or donate them. Dish up home decor. Lots of costumes are made from interesting materials like metallic fabric, netting, or velvet. If you're crafty, start cutting up old costumes. You can turn them into placemats, use the pieces for quilting, or create lovely collages and decoupage projects. There are all sorts of possibilities, including picture frames and potholders. Pinterest is a great resource for ideas and patterns for DIY home decor. Cut it up for festive decorations. The right Halloween costume works for different holidays as well. Keep that crafting spirit and start making holiday decorations. Different pieces from the costumes can work as tree ornaments on their own, but you can also make garlands and ornaments out of bits and pieces of fabric. Get inventive and invite the kids to join in. They'll feel tickled knowing that their old Halloween outfits are now long-lasting holiday decorations. By following these tips, you can feel better about buying a really creative or pricey Halloween costume. What's the most inventive way you've ever reused an old outfit?